from a financial point of view, you can never prepare for what happened in 2020, and a lot of people just didn't have, if they did have their stock insured, their fences weren't. And the fencing game is a really expensive game when you get into it. Some of these guys are still battling. Some of them are still yet to get their full boundaries fixed, just due to the cash flow. But where we try to come in is help these guys rebuild their boundary fence, so at least they can get their cattle back onto their property and generate some sort of income.
LG is running Local Legends. It's a competition to identify and reward and also support members of the community that are doing amazing things and bring some attention to those things that they're doing that maybe they're not getting so far. And some of the stories are quite amazing. One of the winners is Jamie Wolf, and he joins us today. Good morning, Jamie.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm really well. Now, you're a winner of the LG Local Legends initiative, and you've got quite an amazing story because the support that you're doing for your community is really changing lives of so many. It's not something that I'd heard about, or maybe people in the cities hadn't heard about, but it is having one of those effects that is life-changing for people in your community. Welcome, and tell us your story.
Yeah, thank you. Look, it is. It's been a big 11, 12 months now. We're coming up on the 12-month anniversary, of the 2020 bushfires. And our family farm, bit of background, our family farm was burnt out in 2015. And Dad asked me to give me a bit of a hand with the fences. And so when I did that, I always thought, yep, no worries, 2 weeks, we'll be right. And then it ended up being 18 months down the track that we didn't get back to some sort of normality, and that was in a sort of, I guess, mid-sized property around 500 odd acres out there. So when the 2020 bushfires happened, I knew it was going to be a big job. Myself and my dad are actually ex-defence. I'm a veteran. Dad served 22 years in the defence, so it just felt natural that we needed to give a bit of a hand in this regard. So it was Australia's biggest natural disaster. So when I was sitting down one night thinking, how can I help this? It was almost the night of the fire. I launched into a page called Fencing for Fires, and Fencing for Fires has been able to provide support to those who are affected, who lost houses, fences, what have you, in regards to rebuilding their lives. And a lot of people really underestimate the importance of having fencing to be able to get your lives back on track. The first thing they need is to be able to get their income returning through the door. And at the moment, generally, that's probably the last thing that people think about is the fences, but they need their stock on the land. And we started doing a bit of that, and it's just grown and grown and grown to the point now where we've been able to raise over $70,000 in funds, which is we've been able to turn into about $350,000 in materials and labour on the ground, and it's all directly gone straight into the front line. So we've been really pleased to have a lot of community members, a lot of fellow Aussies that have caught along to Fencing for Fires. We're now 8,000 strong on Facebook, and wow, they're putting a lot of time and a lot of money to support. And we've just been able to change a lot of lives, as you said.
You have a background, you mentioned working in the military, you've served overseas, you've helped communities overseas, helping the community here in Victoria, and you also, your page also talks about southern New South Wales, that's your hit zone.
Yep.
Can you describe what happens to the landscape when a bushfire comes through, in particular the fencing infrastructure that's there? And let's remember that the fencing that we're talking about is largely metal designed and built. What happens to the landscape, and what do you need to do once that bushfire has come through?
Yeah, look, it was amazing. When I say it's amazing, it was a devastating sight to see, but it was also amazing at the same time that some of these fires burnt really, really hot. And one moment you had the Upper Murray, for example, is quite a mountainous terrain, and what was there was nice bushy hills, huge mountains, rocks, those kind of things. And when the fire burnt through, it was just left to the bare minimum. There was just rock. That's all you could see into these hills, and it was smouldering for weeks and months later. It was crazy to see, even travelling into. I remember driving into Batlow and seeing just the devastation there, and there was still trees pretty much smoking and fire coming out of them, and that was 2-3 weeks after it had happened. So the fire has burned, or they generally burn fairly quickly through, but this one was just an absolute monster, you could say, and it was burning over 1,000 degrees in some places, and you can really see at the top of the hills and where the temperature was really hot, it just destroyed whatever was in its path. And the fences, the houses, they stood no chance. They all just melted. They were bending solid steel fence lines just in half and melting them into molds on the ground. And I've seen that with even vehicle mags, vehicle trays. They were literally just melted into malt, and they just dripped away into the terrain and shaped the way the terrain was, and then just dried solidly hard after the fire passed and it all cooled down. It just destroys everything in its path, and I don't think there is a more devastating thing come through, because it's a really from the stories I've heard, it's a really hard thing to stop. And the funny thing that I heard was the sound. A lot of people mentioned the sound, that it was like a freight train coming through. You just couldn't hear anything, and I don't expect that with fire. But a lot of people's memories turn to the sound and the smell, and the smell of ash. It definitely reminded me of my time overseas, helping the other communities through East Timor, etc. That everything was pretty much burning and just had that smell of ash. So it laid there for quite a while, but we've been able to bump into the best season from a crop point of view. So I guess the fires brought some sort of good in a way, but it was just total mind blowing going up there and seeing what had happened.
Talking about the impact on farms from such an event, you mentioned in 2009, from that event on, it was about 18 months until you were back to no longer being affected by your fences being down. What's the effect on productivity of a farm in such a situation for you and from the other farms that you've seen without having that fencing infrastructure in place?
You just don't have the ability to support yourself anymore. And a lot of people, especially we were lucky in our fires. We got 90% of our stock survived somehow, even though all the properties around us lost 400, 500 sheep, hundreds of cattle. I was speaking to a guy in Batlow again that had 1,000 head of cattle perish in the fires, and he had to, make sure that they were sorted fairly quickly, as sad as that is. But 1,000 head, he buried himself in 2 days. It was just crazy. And each of those cattle at the moment, they're anything worth $1,000 to $1,500, $1,700. So even $2,500 for some of the big Herefords at the moment. So these people lost a lot of money, and some had insurance, some didn't. But from a financial point of view, you can never prepare for what happened in 2020, and a lot of people just didn't have. If they did have their stock insured, their fences weren't. And the fencing game is a really expensive game when you get into it. As much as $70,000 sounds like an absolute heap. If I didn't have the relationships I did, and didn't have some great support from businesses around, I wouldn't have been able to provide this, over $350,000 worth of labour and materials, because it's a very expensive game, and that's the hardest thing too. You've got to start with it, so you've got to put the hand in the pocket straight away. So some of these guys are still battling. Some of them are still yet to get their full boundaries fixed, just due to the cash flow. But where we try to come in is help these guys rebuild their boundary fence, so at least they can get their cattle back onto their property and generate some sort of income.
The process from here, you're 12 months in helping these different communities. What's been the feedback from those that you've been able to help, and then where do you plan to go with this from here?
So the feedback's been amazing, and talking about people helping people, having LG run a competition like they did to recognise the people that are in the community and supporting the locals is an amazing thing. There weren't many big businesses in a position or I guess thought of an idea that would allow the people on the ground that are doing great things. There's a lot of them through the LG website that got nominated, and to be able to take a week out and win one, and LG to provide some really good prizes. I was able to collect a TV, a sound bar,
Nice.
and a phone. So that's very unexpected. At the start of it. So to be able to have a company such as LG and LG Australia mainly that have come to the party and supporting the guys on the ground it was mind blowing. And I remember getting the call on a Friday night to say that Fencing for Fires had taken it out for the week, and we were literally, it was pitch black. Me and Dad were on the side of a hill in Upper Murray, and it was starting to rain, and we were trying to fix these fences up, and it was just a little bit of morale boost up there while we were there. It wasn't like the LG. Just said, here's a phone. They were spending tens of thousands of dollars on guys like myself, that to give them a bit of a reward for what they were doing, and latest technologies, etc. So that's been amazing, and the change in the community on the ground, it was life changing, and in a lot of people's eyes was life saving, because a lot of these people were in a bad place mentally to start with. And they get a little bit of burst of energy at the start to say, righto, we're gonna do this. But they literally just hit the wall halfway through. 2, 3, 6 months in, hit the wall, because it was just such an enormous job. And when Fencing for Fires come rolling through the gate, a lot of people sort of like, oh, what's going on here? What's the catch? Well, the catch was nothing. We're here to give you support to get you back on your feet, because that's what we as Australians do. And it was just a natural instinct for myself and Dad, and we've had some great support through the community, and a major one from a lady called Denise Madston, who just called up out of the blue one day and said, do you mind if I pop up with you? And she's a absolute logistical expert, really, and she's been able to help me stay on the fence line while she does all the one percenters, sorts out the food for the guys that come up and help, and sorts out the materials. So it's people like that we come from grassroots, and would I have ever thought it would turn into something that over 8,000 people now rely on and look to when times are down in regards to recovery? And no, I didn't, but to have it's been amazing. And on top of that, I do have a full-time job, so I'm actually doing that on in the background.
Wow.
Fencing for Fire. So which one takes priority? It's not sure at the moment, but
well, you got to feed yourself, Jamie. I mean, the other question I want to know is, did COVID and the issues with COVID slow you down at all?
Yeah, absolutely. It took the focus right off the bushfires, unfortunately, and it's still having lingering effects, I guess. COVID was a massive worldwide pandemic, and that got the focus. The bushfires had it for a month or two, and then straight at that, the pandemic kicked in, and I guess a lot of the support, a lot of the money dried up, because people were losing jobs in regards to being put off through COVID. So a lot of the businesses that would normally support and continue to support throughout the year just didn't have the ability, not through fault of their own, but I guess through fault of trying to survive themselves. And there has been a lot of talk around people, the donations that all come in at the start through other organisations and where they've gone, but some of the situations that we're finding now are just astonishing. I've met a guy recently. He's 77 years old. His fences got started, got about 400 metres done, and since for the next 8 months just stood still, and he's living out of a caravan. And it's just something that we in Australia shouldn't have to put up with. And it made me feel sick when I seen it, and that's why I haven't left his side, I guess, for the last 2 or 3 months. We've been working really hard to get his fences back, which is almost completed. And it was really good to see the other day that he was able to get some cattle in his yards and chuck them off into the market and get some finances back into his bank, because the bank was knocking at the door.
Oh. Jamie, you're a great Australian. Congratulations on what you've achieved, especially over the last 12 months. Thank you for your service with the Defence Force as well. We should not finish the interview before saying that. And
Thank you.
best of luck with it. Look, keep going and reach out if we can ever be of assistance to you in any way. I don't know what that would be, but if you ever have any ideas, let us know. And
no,
congratulations.
look, I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.